of course, there's like a little bit, of a power play, I guess, between a customer and a freelancer. But they are not my boss. That's one thing I sometimes have to tell myself. I have to be a little bit careful, because some clients also don't really realize that, but they are my client. They are not my boss.
Hello, Judith. Welcome to Software Engineering Tales. I'm really glad that you could make it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I obviously know you from LinkedIn because you are quite active there. So I know that you are a software engineer based in Berlin,
yes,
or in Germany. And my first question usually is, how did you got into this kind of work, What was your journey?
I got into software engineering kind of by accident, I guess. So my educational background is in mathematics. And we had to learn, I would say, the absolute basics of coding in our first year at university. But it has nothing to do with the kind of software engineering I do now. It was super basic coding in C and C++, actually. So that was quite tough. And I actually noticed that I enjoy it a lot, that I enjoy the programming a lot more than the mathematics stuff. I still stuck to maths and finished my degree, but I had like a couple of part-time positions as a student in software engineering, which I think gave me a good first idea of what it could be like to work in software. And then after my degree, I decided to pursue a career in software full-time. And that was 7 years ago, and since then I've been doing that.
Do you still remember your junior years?
Yes, I do. I have to say, it was very different back then. I think we were quite privileged, actually. 5, 6, 7 years ago as software engineers, because basically if you could write like a few lines of code in whatever language, people would just hire you. And it's not like that anymore. I have to say that. Yeah. And coming out of school, I definitely wasn't a good programmer. I knew the basics, but nothing more. And then I started in basically a software engineering consulting firm. So I did project-based work, which for me was great because it definitely didn't get boring. I would usually be on a project, sometimes for just a few weeks, sometimes a few months, sometimes as long as a year and a half. But I would get to try out different things and really find my niche. And eventually I kind of settled on full stack web development. But I also tried like embedded coding and these kind of things. So that was super fun. But what I really remember from like my junior days was not knowing anything. So I think even if you have the computer science degree, the theoretical knowledge, that's one thing, but really building software in a team and getting things production ready and shipping features, that's like a completely different topic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's also my experience, because I'm a career switcher, and I had totally different career. I worked in finance for years, and then it is actually 4 years ago, I decided to just go all in. I quit my job and learned. And I must say that back then I didn't have much, issue getting job after 6 months of learning as a career switcher. But today I hear stories all the time about people applying to dozens of jobs and being rejected because they have no experience or no real commercial experience, which is tough. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so would you say that this kind of work where you switched projects more frequently was beneficial for your growth, or were there some different factors that
I think it was
made you the senior?
Yeah. I think it was both, probably. It comes with pros and cons, I guess. So as I said, I loved doing it, especially coming fresh out of university. gave me the opportunity to try out so many different things and learn a lot. But of course, it comes like with the downside that you never really go in depth on one topic. And that's also when I left that first job, that's what I was looking for, to really stay on one project for a longer time and work with one tech stack for a little bit longer and become a bit more of an expert in that field, I think. But now I'm freelancing, so I'm kind of back to the project work. And I think I've noticed that that's my jam. So I'm not like the deep technical expert on any one technology, but I really enjoy starting new projects, building MVPs and prototypes. And that means usually that no two projects have the same tech stack. Like there's always some similarities, but on every project I usually pick up something new. And for me, that works really well. But I think for someone who really wants to have like more deep knowledge in one area, it might make sense to kind of stay on one project for a little bit longer.
How did you decide that, now I want to be a freelancer and I want to work that way?
Yeah, good question. That was about a year and a half ago, I think, that I made that decision. So I had switched jobs quite a lot in the year before. So my first job, that software consulting job, I was there quite long, for almost 5 years. And then I decided to move on. I joined a Berlin-based startup, which was great fun until we were all fired. And then I started at another startup, but that just wasn't a really good fit. So I decided to leave after 3 months, I think. So that was like 3 jobs in 1 year. And I felt like I couldn't do it again. The whole 7-stage interview process, the live coding, the take-home assignments. But also I felt like I really wanted to focus more on building cool products. And one thing I felt, especially like in the Berlin startup scene, was that there's always a lot of politics going on in a company. And I feel that now as a freelancer, it's easier for me to distance myself a little bit from that. I can say like, hey, I really want to help you build this product, but I don't have to be that involved in all the company politics. And that's what I really like about it. And ultimately also the freedom and the flexibility. So I noticed that I really liked working in tech. I enjoyed a lot, but it's also, I think it's high pressure, and that's what I keep hearing from everyone. And I just wanted to have a little bit more control over my schedule, decide how I work, where I work, when I work, and I can do that now as a freelancer.
Yeah, but I suppose there is also the other side of the coin, right? Because you need to find your clients, that's first thing, and then you take more responsibility on yourself. So how does that work? How did you find your first client, for example?
So far, I found all of my clients through my network. So LinkedIn or just referrals from people I worked with in the past. But I think so from talking to other freelancers, I know that it's not the most usual way to go about it. I think that's really what works for me because I have a big network. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So for me, that works very well. But other freelancers, I know they work quite a lot with recruiters who look for projects for them. So that's also an option. And then there's these freelancing platforms where you can look for projects. That didn't really work for me because on these platforms, you're very anonymous. So you upload your CV. But I think I really need to talk to people to give them an idea of who I am, what it's like to work with me. Because, like, again, I don't have the computer science degree. I'm not the strongest technical expert on anything. But I think I am a good engineer because I ask a lot of questions and I consider a lot of things when working on a project. But these kind of things are very difficult to somehow communicate on paper. Exactly. But usually when I talk to people afterwards, they want to work with me. So that's good. So for me, it's really, my network is the most important thing for me right now. That's how I found my first, 3 clients, I think.
And was it just LinkedIn, or how did you build this
Also,
network,
simply from my jobs before. So, of course, I am connected with these people on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, that was also super important for me. Whenever I left a job, I didn't just leave. I usually stayed in touch with the people, and then basically when I went freelance, I just let everyone know that I'm freelancing now, and then sometimes people would refer me to other people in their network. So I think that's also one of my favorite ways to get projects. I sometimes call it like warm introductions. So you might not know the potential client, but you have like a mutual connection. And I think that already establishes like a base level of trust, you know, if you say like, hey, we don't know each other, but we both know Alex, so you can't be like a completely bad person. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
So lots of people ask me like, how do I use my network if I don't have that many followers on LinkedIn? But it's really not about followers on LinkedIn. Like my kind of anonymous LinkedIn followers that I don't know personally, they don't help me get projects, to be honest. It's really the people I know personally that I've worked with in the past who can also vouch for the quality of my work. Like a recommendation is not really worth anything if you can't vouch for the person you're referring. So that's what I would always recommend to everyone, whether it's finding your next full-time position or finding clients for freelancing. Talk to the people you've worked with in the past and ask them for a referral or recommendation, or maybe they just know someone who's looking for some support right now.
And is it usually about the trust when you get into a new contract, or is there like similar kind of interview process, or maybe just like shorter one? But how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on the client. So there's usually some kind of interview process. It tends to be shorter than it is for full-time positions, which makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, as a freelancer, I wouldn't do it right now. Like I've had like, I think a couple of interview processes for freelancing gigs that were 2 interviews, which I think is still fine. So one just to like get to know each other, and then one which is maybe a little bit more technical. But then after that, I would also say like, are we doing this or not? Because the thing is, as a freelancer, you can get rid of me pretty easily. Like the thing is, when you hire a full-time employee, you really want to be sure that it's a good fit. But with freelancers, you can also just hire them for a week, see if it's a good fit, and if not, we're gone again. And that's also sometimes the case, that people basically ask you to do a small test project, but it will be paid. So that's what I had with one client. We had a chat, we saw that we're getting along, and then they said like, hey, just build one feature for us, we're going to pay you for it, and if things go well, we will make this like a long-term thing. And I think that's always the best way, because even if you don't get the project, at least you got paid for the test assignment, and your client can really figure out what it's like to work with you on a real problem, and not one of these like artificial coding assignments that we sometimes get in interviews. And then some people ask for some sort of portfolio or references from previous projects. I think that always really depends on what kind of coding you do. So obviously, if you're a designer or a front-end engineer, it makes total sense to really have a visual portfolio with your past projects. Someone who's, I don't know, a database administrator, it's probably a bit more difficult to demonstrate that.
Yeah. So one practical question which I had in mind is what helps you to get quickly into the new code base, new project, and be like quickly productive, because that's important for freelancer.
That's super important, and I think for that it was absolutely helpful that I had already done project-based work for 5 years, basically. Of course, it's different if you're still in a company, because you still have a manager and you have people who take care of the marketing and client acquisition and accounting. All of that I have to do by myself right now. But I got really good at just setting up my environment and getting going in a new code base, basically. It really helps to know your tools quite well. So the nice thing is, as a freelancer, I usually work on my own laptop, so I don't have to set everything up. I have like my editor and everything ready, and then I typically like to just start, like pick a small task. I usually try to build and run everything on the first day. Sometimes it's not always possible, especially if you're waiting for some access something or configuration or SDK keys or whatever. But in general, I think in a good, well-managed project, you should be able to build and run it, I would even say within 2 hours. And then just talk to the other people who are working on the project, pick a small task and just start coding a little bit. And I think what also helps is to not be afraid or ashamed of doing things wrong. Because one thing I've noticed is that every team has a different standard. And sometimes these standards are clearly communicated, like we do pull requests like this, but sometimes they are also invisible and you only find out during your first code review. But there's no way around it. Like just create that first PR, ship something, and the first pull request, you might get 55 comments, but it's fine. Like that's the only way I think to get started.
Yeah, and is the communication with like internal team members sometimes difficult? Or
I would say no. I think, yeah, for me it's always important that I get along with everyone quite well. So I try to, build some sort of relationship with the people I work with. What's sometimes difficult is, especially if it's a mix of freelancers and full-time employees on the team, to have that distinction. Like, I have a bit more freedom and flexibility, and some clients have to understand that they cannot just treat me like a full-time employee. It just takes time, I guess, sometimes to establish these kind of boundaries. So I will, for example, not just accept any meeting if there's like a random meeting about company values or something and I don't know why I should be there. I will ask why I should be there or simply decline the meeting. I also don't ask for permission when I have a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day. So I think there are like some small differences between full-time people and freelancers, and that can sometimes be a bit difficult. But there again, communication is key, I think. Just letting your clients know like how you usually work. I usually tell them roughly during which times I'm available, and then still like if I take a day off, of course I will let my client know. Like I will not ask for permission, but I will communicate it, obviously. So I think that's always super important. And just, being a bit flexible also, because every client has like a different dynamic in the team going on. And some of them like to communicate quite a lot. Others like to communicate a little bit less. Some people are all about async communication. Others want to jump on a meeting for pretty much everything. So, yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah, but in the end, the communication is the key, and
absolutely.
Really, like listen and not just hear, Yeah. So you talked about how important for you is the performance and your to know your tooling. And one thing that everyone is discussing these days is the use of AI for the development. Do you use AI enhanced tools, or do you have any experience?
I use Copilot, so that's the biggest one for me probably. I haven't used Cursor yet. Everyone is talking about it, but I have yet to try it out. But Copilot for me is definitely a game changer, I would say. I do not feel like it will take my job. Like it's for me right now, it makes my job a lot easier. With like tedious manual tasks, it's kind of like a code autocomplete, but on speed, like much more powerful. And for that, I think it is really great. It's sometimes also great for simply asking questions. So sometimes when I'm in my code editor and I forgot some concept from a specific framework or library, rather than Googling it, I will ask Copilot, because that's less of a context switch. I can stay in my code editor, and Copilot will answer my question also with the context of my own code. So I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, we talked about communication, and I think that exactly is the part that AI cannot take over right now. I do think it will become more and more important for engineers to really understand the problem that we're working on. So I think that's really the biggest task always, to understand what your client wants, then find out if that is really what they want. Like sometimes they have a very specific idea and they tell you like, and I want this and this and this, and I want to use React and Next.js and MongoDB, and they have this very clear idea. But once you try to actually understand their problem and their use case, there might be a much simpler solution. So I think that really is what our job is, finding the best solution for a problem, and then using AI tools to make that happen as quickly and as seamless as possible.
Yeah, I think sometimes the biggest issue is to get the requirements for the thing we are building the right way.
Getting the requirements. Prioritization is a huge issue as well, because usually I don't think I've ever worked on a software engineering team where we were not understaffed. Like every team is understaffed. We never have enough people on the team. We would always like to have more people. So usually there's always a trade-off. Like, do we want to do this or do we want to do that? And do we want to do both things kind of 50%, or do we want to have one thing which is really perfect? So this kind of trade-off, that's also something that AI cannot decide for you. Like maybe it can if you like ask it the right questions. But yeah, I think that will just become more and more important, really, communication skills, and also just, I think, using our personality a lot more. Like, I think that will also become more important, because people want to work with people, right? Yeah.
Do you feel like something changed and you might be a little bit more distant to, like the customers using the products that we are building when we are freelancer, or is it like the same as if you were on the internal team?
That's a good question. I feel, so on the one hand, I feel that I can focus much more on the product than I could as a full-time employee. I usually feel much more productive at the end of the day. I'm usually quite happy with what I can produce as a freelancer, which is a great feeling, because I have way less meetings. On the other hand, I don't feel that I necessarily need to buy into every product I develop. Like if you're a full-time employee at a company, you sometimes feel the need to really support the mission, which is great. I think like it's so much more fun to work on a product that you really support. But as a freelancer, I don't feel that I'm part of the family necessarily. Like I never really liked this notion of coworkers being family. Like I'm friendly with most of my coworkers, and some of my previous coworkers, we are really good friends right now. But I don't like this idea that your team is your family and that you have to support everything they do. And as I said, especially like the political part and this kind of company values, that's something I can distance myself a little bit from. And also I would say it's less of a hierarchy. Of course, there's like a little bit of a power play, I guess, between a customer and a freelancer. But they are not my boss. That's one thing I sometimes have to tell myself. I have to be a little bit careful, because some clients also don't really realize that, but they are my client. They are not my boss, and essentially, exactly. And what this is like a business to business relationship. And of course, like I run a tiny little one-woman business, but I still have to remind myself that this is a B2B relationship, and that there's no hierarchy in a way.
Okay. One question that I ask everyone on this podcast. Tell me about one time that you really messed up and what you learned from that.
Ooh, that's a good question. One time that I really messed up. There was definitely like a very nasty database incident where I don't remember how we managed to do it. But yeah, we basically deleted kind of critical production data. What I learned from it, I think, is just to, well, first of all, own your mistakes. So I noticed it, and then I tried to figure out what was going on. After 2 minutes, I realized that it was super complex, and I kind of asked for help. I was just like writing in Slack, like, hey, this and that happened. I'm still trying to debug. And I think I kind of gave updates as I went along. And then luckily, after a few minutes, one of the other engineers saw it and we tried to solve it together. And I think that was really the most important thing there, to just be very open when something goes wrong so that others can help you fix it. And not, trying to hide your mistakes or something, or try to fix it all on your own. And I think what I also learned from that is that it's really important to own a product as a team. So not say like, hey, this is not my mistake, so I'm not going to fix it. But ultimately, as a team, our goal is to ship a great product and ship cool new features and keep it bug-free most of the time. So yeah, I think that's really important, to focus on the product and the outcome, and not so much on blaming someone or trying to figure out whose mistake it was.
I think everyone I had already on this podcast told about the same thing, that it's really important, to be allowed to make mistakes and to learn from them. So I just want to, ask you if there is something that you feel is very common in the teams, this no blame culture, or because you were through a lot of projects and through a lot of teams, right? So is it common thing in software engineering, or did you have some like horrible experience with that?
I had both, unfortunately. So I think it's becoming more and more common, this like blameless culture. There's even like the term of a blameless post-mortem. I think everyone knows it these days in software engineering. So if we really have like a critical production incident, we will write some sort of post-mortem just to understand the timeline, like what happened at which time, and what caused the issue, what fixed the issue, how long did it take, who was involved, which steps were necessary. But yeah, the emphasis really being on blameless. So at no point will someone write like, and then Judith pushed to main without running the tests, but rather like someone pushed to main without running tests. And what we are learning from that is main should be a protected branch.
Right,
something like that. So I think that's becoming more and more common. And what helps with that is, I guess if people just practice that, if you really notice that when you make a mistake, other people are there to help you without asking like, I don't know, why did you do that? Or are you stupid or something? But also the other side of the medal, I think, is praising people for when things go right. So I think that's also super cool if someone just gives you a shout out when you've done something really good. But of course, like I have worked on teams where it wasn't the case, where it was very much like, okay, who caused this and why did it happen? And that leaves like a really toxic atmosphere. I think that's very dangerous, and ultimately it will make the situation worse, because people will be afraid to make mistakes, and then they will be afraid to probably make any changes. And if they make a mistake, they might not feel safe to admit it and ask for help, and rather try to kind of hide it.
So very last question. What I want from you is like a take-home message. What if our audience should remember just one thing from this interview, what it should be?
I would say to try and stay calm. Like, we are not, probably neither of us is saving the world right now. So it sometimes feels as if we are fighting fires left and right. But from my experience, everything can wait until the morning. And sometimes the most productive thing to do is to go for a walk, have a nice home cooked meal, go for a workout. Because, yeah, I think we really need to be healthy and happy, both physically and mentally, to do a good job. And I'm hoping we can step away from the hustle culture a little bit in software engineering, because it can get quite tense sometimes.